And welcome back to Bayou Time once again, remembering Dr. Al Delahaye. What a great man he was, and great for Nicholls State University. And we're joined now by Dr. James Stewart. There you see Dr. Stewart, department head, professor of mass communications at Nicholls State University. And Dr. Stewart, first of all, welcome to the program. Good seeing you under tough circumstances because, as you well know, being in your position at Nicholls State University, Dr. Delahaye was one of a kind, and certainly sad to see him depart us here on earth.
Yes, it's tough for all of us who knew him. He was close to so many people, and in making the phone calls after his passing, you just realize how many people that he came in contact with. He had a profound impact on their lives.
Yeah, you know, and just knowing how colorful he was, but at the same time, he was so structured. And we often talked, I was looking at an old interview I did with him when he was honored by you all at Nicholls State University. And he was so matter of fact about being honored. And that's the Dr. Delahaye that we all came to love, because he just was out there doing his job. His job was very serious. He didn't let politics get involved in his job. He did it very straight. When you went to his class, he allowed you to clown around a little bit, which I have to admit I did a little bit. But when it was time to get in line, you better get in line, because that red pen was going to be all over the paper. So he had a way of teaching, but he got his point across.
Yes, he did. And you mentioned that dinner, and I remember very well you being there. And the funny thing about that dinner is he wasn't particularly happy about it before it took place, because he didn't like to be the center of attention. That wasn't his style. But when the event took place and all of his former students had shown up, and they had the opportunity to tell him what he meant to them and their lives, he was just thrilled. I mean, that was a huge, essentially, well, for lack of a better description, a family reunion of all the people who had some sort of connection with him. And that was a great, great evening.
You know, as soon as I got the message from Dr. Clune via yourself, I called Tim Hemel, who sort of grown up in the St. Mary area, and he was a student with me. We met at Nicholls, and we became great friends, and Tim, of course, played baseball. And I never forget, me and Tim would always sit in the back, and Tim had one of those new fancy watches at the time where you hit a button and it would play music, and we'd always have the class in stitches, not knowing that Dr. Delahaye all along could hear it. We just thought he was hard of hearing, and the class would laugh, and Dr. Delahaye would keep teaching and never acknowledge the fact that we were even cutting up in the class. Years later, I interviewed him, and he brought that up. He said, "What's Tim Hemel doing now, and does he still have that watch that y'all used to play the music on every day?" And it was at that point that I said, "Dr. Delahaye, you heard that?" He goes, "I heard it every day." He said, "But I was not going to give y'all the credit to stop the class, and I was not even going to give y'all the acknowledgement that y'all were cutting up in the class." He would have been a great poker player, right?
Oh, he would have been. I mean, just two quick stories is that, first off, I knew him for years before I realized he was a Marine. And, you know, as I got to know him as an adult after school, you know, he was very proud of his service and did some amazing things while he was in it. His occupation in the military was listed as combat correspondent. Now, he never went overseas, but he did a lot of public relations work with the Marine Corps. And he got to meet people like Robert Mitchum and other, you know, famous people in Hollywood. But you wouldn't have known that from meeting him the first time, because we knew him as the guy in the coat and the tie who was talking about the AP style rules and, you know, was talking about opera and things of, I guess for lack of a better description, genteel nature. But he was very proud of his service. And the other thing is, he and some buddies of his went to Moscow during the height of the Cold War, when Nixon was having a meeting with Khrushchev in what's called the kitchen debate. And he was there with some other people who were guests of the U.S. Embassy for the event of an exposition opening. And as the event was closing down and people were leaving, he reached over there and swiped two of the glasses that Nixon and Khrushchev had been using for toast, and he kept those things for years. So yeah, there were a lot of things about him that you may not guess just meeting him for the first time.
You know, and he was just one of those professors that, I'm not going to use the word different, although he was different. He was very focused on what he was teaching. He was very steadfast on what he was teaching, but he wasn't overbearing to where he walked into class and you were intimidated. He had once again allowed you to cut up, and when it was time to corral you and get you focused, you knew when those papers were coming out after you had written the story and he was passing them out, you knew you were going to see a little red ink on those papers. And as you got better, you saw less and less red ink, which means you were progressing. He was all about progression.
Yes, he was. And, you know, I think my story is fairly typical in that, you know, when I got to Nichols as a freshman, on paper, I don't think I was impressing anybody. But he tracked me down one afternoon at the ROTC building and hand-delivered an application to me for a scholarship. And I filled it out, and that allowed me to, you know, go to school during the semester and focus on school, not have to take a part-time job. And then going forward, you know, he helped me at every stage of my career. And I know he's kept in contact with you and other of his students, and, you know, that he was always there for advice and, guidance, as, you know, no matter how many years you've been out of school. And you're right. I mean, he remembered every student he ever taught. You could bring up a given student's name, he would remember them. He'd have an anecdote to tell about them. It was very, very impressive.
All right, we'll take a break now. There you have it. Dr. James Stewart remembering Dr. Al Delahaye.